She's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Harleigh, food blogger, content creator and overeater. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I've been making sourdough bread. I've learned from a mixture of books and 2 videos in particular. So I'm going to reference those where I've seen them, and I'll put both of the videos in the description and also a link to the book. The book is called The Larousse Book of Bread by Eric Kaiser. My first sourdough starter used the liquid sourdough starter method from his book, which was good. I just don't think I had deep enough flour. His method asks for rye flour. During this lockdown, I haven't been able to get rye flour, so I used some wholemeal bread flour instead. I don't think it had the complexity to actually produce like basically a good flavorful ferment. I also kind of overbaked it, so I've just been on a mission to improve it since then. So today I'm going to be taking on my 5th sourdough bread. Everyone's sourdough starters are different. Some people start them with yogurt, some people start them with, you can start them with a little bit of fruit like apples or grapes, which basically give the flour something to eat. And I'll link some videos below with amazing sourdough starter kind of methods and feeding patterns. In this video, I'm going to take you from having sourdough starter ready. Bread Ahead in London are actually selling starter. They do a little set at the moment, which is starter, some bread flour, and also some fresh yeast. But at this point, we are going to be making the bread. So we've already got the starter. My starter is here. Everyone talks about naming their starters, and I haven't actually named my starter, but this is Mason on the jar, so just call it Mason. So to make my sourdough bread, or sourdough bread the way I have learned so far, you will need a plastic bowl. So I have 2 of these. One is for more of the assembly stage and the other one is for proofing, just because I like the flour can get around the top and start to get a bit like little crunchy edges. So I kind of prefer to do the kneading and messy bits in one bowl and then transfer it to an oiled clean bowl. If you want to, while your dough's on the surface, you can just wash this one bowl out. So one bowl, but plastic. So the plastic bowl technique I learned from Matt Jones at Bread Ahead Bakery. If you can tell, one of my favorite places in the world. They've been doing Instagram lives, basically teaching people how to make different types of bread. They've also set up a separate Instagram account called the Sourdough Hotel. So if you want to see what other people's sourdoughs are looking like, and they also have lives on there, definitely jump onto Instagram and follow the Sourdough Hotel. So he explained that plastic bowls are, I don't want to say naturally, but naturally just kind of room temperature, whereas if you use a metal bowl or a glass bowl, as we know, they conduct temperature, so they are naturally a bit colder. Second thing you'll need is starter. Third thing you'll need is white strong bread flour. You also need some brown, some grains, some rye. I have a country grain flour by Allinson's. So I'm going to use a bit of both of these. This is the Allinson's bread country grain flour, and this is some Tesco strong stone ground wholemeal flour. Salt, you'll need about 10 grams for the recipe that I'm doing. I'll be using just Maldon sea salt. Water, I would recommend just having a jug of water just ready, like as big as you can get, and then another plastic cup to basically weigh out your increments, because once your hands get a bit doughy, you might not want to be turning on the taps or, you know, getting your jugs and things. A dough scraper, would I be Bread Ahead stand without the Bread Ahead dough scraper? Some olive oil, again, you only need maybe like 2 or 3 tablespoons. A banneton or a similar kind of shaped and sized bowl. So this is dependent on what shape loaf you want to make. This particular loaf and the hydration of this loaf means that it will require a banneton to basically set its shape, and it will prove in here like for a number of hours. Different types of breads, different types of sourdoughs, different ratios of water to flour may result in a bread which can hold its shape on its own and doesn't need to be kept in a banneton if you don't have one. A Dutch oven, which is basically just a cast iron casserole dish. I think in the UK we just call them cast iron casserole dishes. In my house we seem to think it's called a tagine. Mine's by Pyrex. I know the big branded ones are by like Le Creuset. And also a baker's blade, which is also called, I think, a lame. I'm improvising. My dad has a never been used before barbering blade. The thing that I've been most disappointed about is that my scores aren't deep enough on my bread, which I think because my knife isn't sharp enough when I score it. So hopefully I'm gonna use this for the first time and we should get some nice deep scores. The scores are really important for letting the CO2 out and like getting a nice puffy shape as you bake. So this is going to be the best loaf yet. So to anybody who recognizes this method or these ingredients or anything like that, this is basically just a summary and a kind of like a little bit more detailed methodology of the Bon Appetit method, where Claire teaches Brad how to make sourdough bread. So from my understanding, ortilis is basically a it's a sciencey part of bread making. Everything that you're doing is basically affecting either the gluten, the hydration, or the air. So I think this step is more about the gluten because we haven't actually done any kneading or folding. I've seen loads of pictures where bread either like has had an auto-lees and rest, hasn't had an auto-lees and rest, and it just seems to be a difference in the crumb texture. Claire said auto-lees, we're gonna auto-lees. So for this auto-lees, we're basically gonna mix together all of our flours and some of the water. So for this recipe, we're gonna use 375 grams of strong white bread flour and then 125 grams of a brown and spelt and rye, some kind of like flavorful mix. So I've used 100 grams of the Allinson's Country Grain mix bread flour and 25 grams of the Tesco's wholemeal stone ground whatever it was called, bringing us to 500 grams of flour in total. As I said, everyone's sourdough is different and the basic principles are about ratios. So as you can see there, we have 500 grams of flour. So if you'd rather mix more rye, more spelt, less white, more grain, go ahead, but we're aiming for 500 grams total of flour. To that, you're gonna add 375 grams of water, and then you literally just wanna use your bread scraper or even your hands, a spoon, anything you like, to just bring it together into like a kind of, I think they call it like a ragged dough, like a shaggy dough, just incorporated. We're not trying to knead it here. I've mixed it for a total of less than 1 minute. With the auto-lees, we're going to rest this mix now, and it can rest anywhere from basically 30 minutes to 5 hours, depending on the amount of dough you have, the amount of time you have. I'm going to rest mine for probably just 1 hour, and then we'll come back to it and start the next step. So once your auto-lees has auto-leesed, we're gonna add the starter, the water, and the salt. So I added 140 grams of sourdough starter. So in Claire's video, I think she adds around 20% of the total flour weight of starter. So in this case, I've gone a little bit above, but again, you can fluctuate the amount of starter you want depending on the amount of flavor you want, the amount of time you have. And Claire said the less starter, the longer the ferment. So for this bread, time is flavor. And then to the 140 grams of starter, I added 10 grams of salt and 25 milliliters of water. You will see that straight away, once you add the extra water and the salt specifically, that the texture goes from being quite slimy into wanting to come together into like a really nice dough. So the kneading technique that I adopted from Claire and Brad's video is this kind of like slap, like literally slap it down. They have these different kind of like drag and slap motions, or pulls or pushes or even tears with your nails across the counter, which I think all depend on the hydration of your dough, how wet or dry it is. So this dough specifically, the kind of motion that I'm going for is a slap, a pull, and as I'm going over, I'm kind of like tucking the top over the bottom and then tucking the sides under itself. Continue this slap and fold motion for 5 minutes. Once you're done with the kneading method, you're going to move it to, as I said, I have 2 plastic bowls. So one of them, I've just put a little bit of olive oil around, literally about 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil around the edge of the bowl and in the bottom. And you're just going to transfer the dough in 1 scoop into that bowl. Cover with a clean tea towel or cling film, depending on what you have, and basically leave in a warm place for 30 minutes. Okay, so it's been a little over 30 minutes and the baby is in here. Not too much action going on. We're just gonna fold her now. Forget everything we said about being rough and like slapping. Now we just wanna be really gentle. We're gonna retain any air that is built up in there. It's only been half an hour. We're gonna do this for a good number of hours. And basically scoop under and create folds to fold back on itself. So it's been about 4, maybe 5 hours of 30-minute turns, exactly the same way, from the middle, pull it up, drop it down, fold it over, pull it over, and see what bubbles we have now and move on to the next step. Ooh, we've got some nice, big, visible bubbles everywhere. These bubbles have been coming up in each turn, but now we're gonna move it onto the surface. Welcome back to day 2 of the sourdough bread making video. I just wanted to do a quick recap on what I did last night because it was too dark to film and just stuff was going on in the house anyway. So at the end of your first day, after you've done all of the folding, again, this is my timeline because I started it around midday. So I finished all the folds around 6 p.m. and then basically you turn it out onto a floured surface, pre-shape your loaf, let it rest seam side down for about 10 minutes. in this time, you're basically going to prepare your banneton or Pyrex bowl lined with just a tea towel, a clean tea towel, to basically overnight proof your bread in. It's the bulk fermentation section. And you need to transfer the bread so that it is seam side up now. So you're going to move it from seam side down where it's resting to seam side up. If you need to here, if it's like just kind of losing its shape or coming apart, you can just fold it on itself. I think the method's called stitching, where you basically just like create little pleats with your fingers to, yeah, create like a top seam basically. But don't worry about how ugly it is, because once it bakes, it's going to be the bottom. So now today what we need to do is bake it. So what we're going to do is take our Dutch oven, cast iron casserole dish, tagine, whatever you want to call it, and preheat the oven on the maximum settings. Just on a normal oven setting, not fan. Don't try and overheat it by compensating with the fan. Just whack it in there for about 20 minutes and preheat the dish itself. So what you need to do then is take a small side plate or a chopping board or anything that you want to basically transfer the bread to. And I've just basically cut a small circle of greaseproof paper, the same size as the plate, but a little bit bigger than my bread will be so that I can maneuver it. I floured that. So I kind of messed up here because I floured the bread and then realized that I couldn't turn it out onto the thing. So then I ended up losing some of the flour. So either flour the surface of your seam bread or flour the paper if you're going to go bread to plate or plate to bread, whichever one makes sense. And then we're going to take our makeshift baker's lamb, or if you have a really, really sharp blade, and make scores on the top of the bread. And then carefully, because your dish is so hot after being in the oven, place the bread into your cast iron skillet, dish, whatever. And that's why I make the paper just a little bit bigger than the bread itself, so that I have that maneuverability. Try not to drop it from too high, because you will burst the air bubbles that are in the bread. Get it in, put the lid on, bake it for 15 minutes with the lid on, still at full temperature. And then halfway through, take the lid off, bake for another 15 minutes, and we should have bread. Here is our beautiful sourdough loaf. As you can see, mine was quite heavily floured, so that's all that this is on the top. My score lines still are my weakness. They're still not quite deep enough. You can see here where it's been like scored deep enough, but then kind of sealed up in the oven. But yeah, now let's do the cut and check the crumb. I really hope she's beautiful. Please be beautiful. She's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. I love her so much. I actually just ate a piece of her. If there's flour on my face, that's why. This is definitely like my most improved one. It's so soft and got a really good crust, really good crumb. And that is the end of our sourdough bread production. We're having it now as open fish finger sandwiches. I'm gonna have some with soup. Typically we've had it on the second day, and actually the third. I think the last one lasted to a third day, and just toasted in the morning with butter and jam. Butter, well, I have unsalted butter because of so much bacon, but butter with a bit of salt, like crunchy sea salt on this.